So hello everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming today. We will be doing a little workshop on navigating research biases. The goal is to identify them, but also to find some mitigation strategies. So for the one who don't know me, I'm Stéphanie Walter. I'm a UX researcher and product designer, and I live and work in Luxembourg. I've been in France before that, Germany, mostly in German-speaking countries at the moment. Let's see the schedule. So I'll do a small introduction about what cognitive biases are. We will see how they can impact especially enterprise research, and we will do some exercise on mitigation strategies. So I will talk a little bit, but mostly you will be doing the stuff today. Little introduction. So usually when we talk about cognitive biases, people often refer to this giant wheel. So like, this is a codex of cognitive biases. It's dated from 2016, and there's a lot of them, and that kind of looks a little bit scary sometimes. But the thing is, they do not all apply all the time. So a bias is basically, or cognitive biases, there are psychological tendencies that cause the human brain to draw incorrect conclusions. The thing is, on a daily basis, we have to take a lot of decisions to function. And if all of those decisions were how can I say that? Conscious decision, we could not function, basically. If I had to think every time I need to breathe, to speak, to move, stuff like that. So at some point, the brain is going to take shortcuts. And most of the shortcuts is, of course, for like physical functions, but sometimes we also take those shortcuts when we think, when we interpret how people are saying something in group meetings and stuff like that. The fun or not so fun part is that for better or worse, we can use them in different ways, and they will also impact our users. So most of the time when I talk about cognitive biases, I talk about things like that. Like, how do designers use cognitive biases on websites? And I like Booking because they're using a lot of the tricks in the book. So you might be familiar with the term deceptive patterns. It used to be called dark patterns. They've renamed it in deceptive patterns. And they're kind of linked with cognitive biases. It's like basically they are using biases to trick users into doing something. So that's the thing, is like if I zoom in on one of those, like only one room left. At no time am I telling you like you really need to book very quickly. The fact that it's in red is like only one room left, exclamation point. Your brain goes into, oh my God, I need to book now. Though this is the scarcity effect and loss aversion, which is basically like, I'm not telling you you need to book right now, otherwise you will not have a room. Your brain is taking this kind of shortcut. So this is how it sometimes gets a little bit abused depending on the websites. Another example is this one, high demand, again, red, exclamation mark, booked 20 times in the last 24 hours. So here, the shortcut for my brain is basically like, other people booked it. Maybe it's a nice room. Maybe I should book it too. So this is called the bandwagon effect. And this one we will talk about again. So here you see how is it used basically on a website to trick people. But what will happen is they will also affect our user research, especially in enterprise UX. So to give you a couple of examples, what happens is, how can I say that? So it's interesting to understand as a UX researcher how biases will impact me, because there's like one of the best mitigation strategy about biases is being aware. It's like, if you don't know, you don't know. So if you don't know that something exists, you cannot kind of try to avoid it, or kind of try to avoid inducing it into your user, for instance. So for better or worse, again, some of those biases will deeply influence our user research, from the attitude of the researcher toward the research, toward the data analysis, towards the users, but also like users' attitude towards us as researchers. And also, especially in enterprise UX, we do a lot of stakeholder management, like high level, very strategic collaboration and all of that. And here what we end up having is a lot of group biases, which is biases that will impact people when they are put together as a pact in a room, in a group or something like that. So I've basically created this deck of 63 cards now about cognitive biases. In the full set, I have 5 categories. Today, we will mostly be interested in 3 categories. So I cherry-picked the biases that are kind of interesting to have a discussion today. And we will talk about user research biases, teamwork and project, and some of the thinking and problem-solving biases because they will impact the researcher and the designer, and also the users. So to give you a little bit of a couple of examples, the cards look like that. They have a title, they all have a descriptions. So one of the big one that I have often, I work at a bank and I have the courtesy bias, is the tendency to avoid expressing negative feedback or unhappiness regarding a product or a service in an attempt to be polite with those who seek their opinion. So the thing is, my users are technically also my colleagues. I work in IT, they work in business, but we are colleagues. So if I go to them and I ask them, okay, do you like the new design? They will say yes, because I'm a colleague, they don't want to be rude, something like that. So this bias happens a lot. And this is also why when you are doing like surveys or even like user research, one of the main rules is like, don't ask people if they like something, of course, but that's kind of the easy trap to fall into, but we need to be aware of such things. Because just like the fact that we are asking people about their opinion about something, if they think we designed it, if they think we have an emotional connection with the thing, they want to be polite. So they might not be as honest as they should be. And it's not even a fault. They might not even realize that they're just being polite with you. It gets worse when you invite people in your setting. Like if you're a big brand company, you invite people in your office, you give them a gift or something, they might be impressed. And then they might be even more inclined to be nice to you. Because again, you give them a gift or like just like coffee and sugar or something like that. Another example is a bandwagon effect. It can be summarized like this. Is the gift working? Yay. I don't know the people if you know this game, but it's like basically very old school learning game where you need to place them, and otherwise they all follow the same one. So if you don't put a stop here, they will just like fall forever. So let me go back. So this is the tendency to believe or make decisions based on many other people do the same. So usually it's popularity contest. The more popular and adoptive the belief action decision, the more people accept and follow it. So here it's becoming very, very tricky. So with especially with group decisions. But I have an example where we were redesigning the navigation. The old navigation was, how can I say that politely, lacking good information architecture. They were mixing knives and potatoes, which eventually belong together, but like the knife, the potato in the same category. So, and the issue is like people got used to have knives and potato mixed together. So what happened is like, we tested the navigation and everyone was happy until someone in an email chain said, oh, but I have an issue with the new navigation. I can't find my items anymore. And then like chain reaction, like this was the leader of the pact. And then everyone was like, yeah, me too, me too, me too. It's like, what the hell? And my colleague went livid. They were like, what is happening? And during a meeting, like, again, they explained how they had so many issues with the navigation. It's like, what happened? So they said, like, look, let's split the group, remove the leader of the pact. And we did like 1 by 1 sessions or 2 by 2. And we observed people and they were able to find the stuff. So we're like, but you said you had issues with the navigation. And at the end of the day, it was just like bandwagon effect. They were like, yeah, personally, I'm okay, but I know this colleague has some problems. So I was like, so you're basically all saying you have a problem because you're following the leader who said that, while only one user has a problem. So here, the fact that we split them, we remove the group effects, helped us understand like, no, this is not a real problem with the group. They're just like following the leader. And like the problem at the bank, which is enterprise, is often, and it's very, very hard to have people talk about what they need, what they work, how they work. It's like, yeah, I work like that. But like, I think my colleagues will not, like, I don't care about your colleague. We're here to talk about you. But often they've been trained to express the group behavior. So it's sometimes a little bit tricky to go beyond that. Okay, last example. and then you are going to have fun. Fundamental attribution error. I love how some of those names are very fancy. Basically, it means when we explain the behavior of someone, we tend to blame them on their own personality, and we underestimate the situation and environmental facts. Like we think they're lazy instead of because they're late, instead of saying, oh, man, crap, traffic jam, this is why they're late. So I was doing a study with, we did a design sprint to test the design sprint method at the university. I was working for a university. And we had a group who created a prototype, and in the group was the main developer. And we did some usability testing because the idea of a design sprint is like we test the stuff at the end. And I was never so happy that the observation room was 2 floors above the room where the user was. Like the developer was shouting at the screen, but this user is completely stupid. She doesn't understand. She's so dumb. You should have picked a better user. Like, no, dude, no. I was basically blaming her for being dumb or something, while clearly there were a lot of problems with the prototype that he created. So this one is often tricky because, yeah, it's easier to blame it on the people than actually on the system. And again, it gets even worse when you have an emotional attachment, and clearly this developer had. So I was like, thank whatever God or entity you want, like we're not in the same room as the user. Otherwise, it would have been very tricky that day. So yeah, that's like 3 kind of example coming from real life. What's your 2 favorite examples? And who presents?
Let me know in case I should make someone a co-host.
No, I can show the
Okay,
the mirror board.
Perfect.
Okay, group 1. Did we lose the whole group or?
I mean, we didn't agree a speaker. Yeah. Okay, so we have chosen like the not maybe the two favorite one, but 2 most common ones in our case, and it was the confirmation bias and the illusion of transparency, like those 2. And confirmation bias, we've discussed. It's most common when someone jumps into the research who is not researcher, non-researcher, or is not researching a lot, especially in case of stakeholders, PMs, and other parties, right? And the illusion of transparency is often when someone is less experienced or very experienced in the topic, and they have like the feeling of know-it-all, right? So they are not rephrasing or paraphrasing and so on. Hence to that, they think they understand like one-to-one what the respondent is saying.
Okay, do you have maybe a specific example that you discussed from one of those that happened to you or to colleagues or?
Okay, me or someone else?
I don't know. You have the names here, so if someone wants to give one of the interesting examples from a real life project.
Yeah. Okay, Carolina, the illusion of transparency is yours.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So illusion of transparency, this was new to me because I haven't heard about this one before. And I have realized when working on this example that often, first of all, I thought about it from the slightly different angle as lack of transparency as a researcher, or illusion of the transparency as a researcher, because I sometimes believe that I can be transparent with everyone, sharing the insights, inviting about my process. And based on this one example and this description, I have realized that there probably are some limitations to being transparent. So this was new to me. And we were discussing 2 examples when we need to share the insights in context of not being an expert in the domain or expert in the field or in the product. And maybe we are having the knowledge gaps. So we are not that transparent. Sorry, I have background noise. With the insights that we are sharing. And we were discussing different ways how to approach that. Is, for example, aligning with experts, product experts or domain experts on the insights that would be shared before share out or before the readout, or adjusting the level of details. So these were the solutions actually to this problem that we have discussed. So very interesting example.
That's
in
next
illusion of
step.
transparency. Yes, exactly. we went one step further.
Okay.
But yeah, but that's the one that we have discussed. Yes, that's
Okay.
Mhm.
One example often is when you do empathy map or like anything with empathy, often people are like, yeah, you need to put the sentiments of the user, what do they feel? And often people fall into this trap where they overestimate their capability of understanding what someone else is feeling. So that can be also sometimes a little bit tricky, especially when you start working in environments that are like multilingual, multicultural, then it's even worse. So this is a kind of illusion of transparency where we're like, yeah, that person was totally angry. Like, no, they're just like that. So that's also one of those traps. Okay, nice. So new rules, the ones that were presented are not available anymore, unless you have an amazing example. But so you don't all have the same ones, don't worry. So you should still have something to present. But okay, group 2. Normally you don't have the same ones.
Yeah,
so
hi.
you should be safe for now.
We should be. Well, I would like to give an example of the authority bias that actually covers as well
Yeah.
the sunk cost fallacy, which was a result of it, in which I was working at a large company where a small group of people decided on a strategy that was not very well based on user needs. And we actually saw that in order to make that strategy happen, in order to go in that direction, we actually had to ignore a couple of user needs. So the whole company steered in the other direction. And as we went along, we went for a very expensive implementation roadmap, which then of course turned out not to have the effect wanted because it was not based on the actual user needs. But as already a lot of money was invested in this roadmap, a year later they just threw more money on the pile in order to have something out of it. So that was like both of those issues at the same time, one coming forth from the other in that particular example. But then we discussed as well.
So many pills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the same.
Then we discussed as well the congruence bias, where we had some more examples,
The
and
name
maybe
is fun.
someone else from our group. I believe the past team members designing a test that was not unbiased. Who had the example there?
That was
No one?
Tanisha, I believe. I think, yeah.
Right.
Was that yours, Tanisha? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'll just give an example of what we did. So I work, for just context for everyone else, I work in the pharmaceutical industry, and we tend to work with older people, or that's who our conditions we focus on are highlighted towards. So as we were building, as the designers and devs were building an app, we received a lot of feedback regarding content navigation and how certain things in the layout were confusing, and people had a lot of questions. The issue was that the designers and other stakeholders kind of dismissed that feedback as, well, if people are older, they don't understand the technology, so they just don't get it. So to them, they figured technology would be inherently confusing to older people, which I kind of explained that that's not really the case in past studies about mobile usage and internet usage. And so I think I said it was kind of a cop out to use people's age as a way of deflecting or not wanting to improve on design. And so that was kind of my example of, taking that and I guess that kind of bias.
So that's fundamental error, right?
Yes.
Okay, just to be sure. Okay, so group 3, you cannot do the other ones. I promise next round we switch.
Okay. Well, luckily we picked the Hawthorne effect and sunk cost fallacy, which I don't think have been done. So I'm going to talk about Hawthorne, and Mason's going to talk about sunk cost fallacy. So Hawthorne effect is, essentially people behave differently when they know they're being observed. So like one of the examples we have here is, interacting in a prototype during a test in a way that they wouldn't normally do. So like I've definitely seen that happen. Another thing we were talking about too is, I don't know what's going on with that sticky, but that like users seem to behave differently based upon like how they're observed, or like, the higher fidelity that they are being recorded, the more guarded they tend to be. So like at the beginning of this session, you asked us to put our cameras on, and some people were not as happy about that. So it's like having the camera off, is they probably act a little more naturally. If they're not audio recorded, they probably, so that's kind of an interesting piece of the Hawthorne effect. Like there's tiers of it potentially. Yeah. So
I was going to talk about cost, but it has partially been covered already. Does that give us a free pass, or do we have
to... yeah.
break any rules? Yeah. So we discussed this as examples that we've seen from two different sides of the same coin. One of it we see from the developers or the engineers. Particularly, I work for a SaaS company, right, where we see engineers very reluctant to change the direction or pivot on features simply because they've X% through the development of a particular feature, and they just think this, sod it, let's just ship it and we can iterate in quotation marks there, because they've invested so much time and resources into a particular feature. And this happens even if new evidence comes to light that actually the user needs have changed slightly, potentially the user base has changed as well, but we're still going to go ahead and ship it because we've spent time writing code. So that's one side that we see it. The other side is we see it from a product management, product ownership point of view, where some products, I won't call everyone with the same brush, but some product folks will have a beautifully crafted roadmap and some beautifully crafted Gantt charts of when things are going to get released. And that is the direction we're sticking to, regardless of whether or not priorities or the situation changes from the data. It's almost like being tied down to an anchor, i.e. a roadmap as an anchor. And if your ship's sinking, you're still going to cling onto that anchor because it was expensive and you bought it. So you're going to go down with it, irrespective of the evidence. So those are the two examples that
nice example indeed.
People, yeah.
The sunk cost fallacy is happening so often in enterprise. It's just amazing. Okay, let's group. Do you have some that were not covered yet? I think there's still a couple left.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. We have blind spot bias, and the second one, to be honest, I can't remember. So Moria will I think cover that. So yeah, the blind spot bias, I experienced this myself when I work in for a job board company. So we work with job seekers, people who are looking for jobs. And when I first joined, we realized that we were focusing too much on on people like us, so office workers, white collar workers, and we assume that all our users' needs, motivations, and behaviors were basically pretty much aligning with ours, instead of also with those other needs, motivations, and behaviors from blue collar workers or pink collar workers. We also knew that the majority of our audience and users were actually coming from blue collar and pink collar backgrounds and jobs. So there was just a misalignment in what we were thinking, basically. And the way we tried to solve that was just capturing this data a bit more explicitly in surveys and recruitment surveys, asking users what jobs they were doing, and seeing if there was any pattern there in the difference in kind of responses, as an example, and then recruiting, balancing out a bit more the recruitment. So getting a few people from white collar jobs, a few people from blue collar, and a few people from pink collar jobs. Yeah, and the next one, I think, Moria, was it you presenting?
Yeah, it was. And I have confirmation bias. I believe we've already done that. So I don't know if I'm happy to give the example.
Did we do confirmation or did we do observation, observer expense? I hate this word. Expectancy. No, I think we did confirmation. But if the example is good, I will allow it.
Sure. Okay, let's give it a go. So I've experienced confirmation bias primarily in like high strategy or like high impact projects. So think like benchmarking or something like that. There's often a lot of a pressure exerted from above to see change or to see something, even if the data is not showing that. You know, if we've implemented a change, it's really hard for someone, and I completely understand why, to hear like there's no difference in task success or, you know, any of the metrics that we were looking for. And so oftentimes there's this like, no, but there has to be a change. We want to put this in a slide for our, you know, quarterly meeting. Find me something that gives me some kind of change, give me a percentage change of something. So there's this like kind of sifting around through the data, trying to find anything because they're assuming there's going to be a change and they want it kind of no matter what. So I guess it's kind of a mix of biases there now that I'm saying it out loud around authority bias and things like that.
Yeah. I think we had the question, the difference between those two. Can I duplicate it? No. Okay. So difference between observer expectancy effect and confirmation is here is more for the researcher, which is if you expect an outcome, you will even unconsciously design your own test in a way. So here is already at the beginning. When you design the stuff, you might design it in a way that will confirm things. Confirmation is more like later. It's like, okay, you've observed something, but you had an hypothesis, and then when you check the stuff, you're like, okay, I might cherry pick only the stuff that is going to confirm what I thought. I had a note taker who did that a lot, so I had to explain to it. He was basically cherry picking the notes, like everything that went into the direction of our assumption was taking into notes, and when it went against, he kind of forgot about it. I was like, no, dude. Please don't do that. So it's more, they're all linked together. A lot of them are kind of blurry, the line, but that's kind of the idea between either the observer already creates their own condition, basically, this can create this, and this might result into observer. So they're kind of intertwined. And for this one, I have a fun example to the blind spot. Is like I was doing this workshop with in face-to-face with some people, and there's this bias which is not invented here, which is a bias where usually developers have it, which is if the code or if the stuff was not developed in-house, it's less. But why is it less? We don't know, just because it was not developed here. And like I had a developer who could not understand the bias. So I explained to him the bias 2 times, and then he was like, yeah, but I don't understand exactly. But for instance, if the code we didn't produce it, it's not, we might not have a good code. It's like, but why? It's like, because we didn't produce it, but why? It's like, because it might have security. So I was like asking why, and all the people around me started smiling because they were basically seeing think that this guy was so much biased into this not invented here that he could not understand the bias. So that's the idea. And with the blind spot bias is also like, it's easier when you are working with colleagues to spot the biases in their work than in your own, which is fun because this bias becomes a mitigation strategy at some point. You can basically use this bias or the other way around as a way to mitigate things. Okay, speaking of mitigating things, let me share that again. So you had very nice examples. The goal now is to check, okay, but how can we avoid that or at least mitigate it? So what I ended up doing is I've created these little cards with different type of mitigation strategies. So I will not go through all the cards now. You will have time to check them in the board. But the first thing we can do when it comes to mitigation is our own attitudes as a researcher. It's basically, it sounds very guru thingy, like self-awareness. And this is also why it's very important for researchers to understand biases. So we can put in place some practices to recognize the biases, to be able to spot them in our own work, but also in colleagues' work. So this is more about research attitudes towards our work. Things like being aware of our own body language, because even that might bias someone. If you like smile every time the user is doing something nice and you're like, when they can't find something, that can be tricky. So all of those are more like about the attitude of the researcher themselves. Then one way of mitigating bias is not to rely on only one method. Some methods might be more biased than others. So this is where we will start talking about mixed method, mixing quantitative, qualitative, having stuff like that. Observation also, if you don't trust what people are saying, sometimes observing them can give some interesting results. So here I have two little cards. Then this is where my, I forgot the name. I'm so bad with those names. Blind spot, good. This is where my blind spot bias come into place. Peer review and iteration. That's one way of doing it. Since it's very hard to find biases in our own way of thinking, it's easier to review the work of other people. And if you're a solo researcher, it could be someone else who's not a researcher. If they're also kind of aware of biases, it could be a PM, it could be a PO, even a developer, like a colleague who can review your work. And we do that a lot in academic, where you have a lot of peer review and iteration to make sure that you mitigate as much as you can. So seeing feedback on what you design, your design artifact, like your prototype, things like that. And then, trying not to work alone, which is sometimes easier said than done. But again, you might not need another researcher. You can find someone who at least can double check your artifacts. Then there's things about handling data analysis. So here is to make sure we interpret the results accurately. So it's about waiting for the whole data to do the analysis and not like jumping into conclusions. My colleagues love to do that. After usability test, they want to jump into writing the stories like, hold on, this is one user. Let's wait to get more data on that. Also like recording, getting a transcript to make sure that you don't misinterpret something, or even worse, that you don't remember something the wrong way. Things about mitigating group dynamics. Often it's about removing the group elements. So finding ways to break this into like not having group, like avoid having collective, avoid having like group feedback, start having individual feedback first and then get the group one. Anonymizing contribution. So if you like doing those sort of things where you ask people for their opinion, even in a setup, you can ask them to put on a paper and then they put in a bag. Like, of course, you could check the handwritings, but at some point, that's kind of going very, very far. Transparency and communication. So those are strategies about communicating with the stakeholders about the project. So actually, I have a lot of those here, which is I will let you take a look. But it's like bringing the user research data to the stakeholders so they can actually take good decision, communicating the research results. Often this will help with all of these things like sunk cost fallacy and all of that. If you can bring like actual research to say, look, we cannot keep investing in that; it's going nowhere. And here you see the users are basically, it's not working for them. There's no, depends on your KPI, but like attractiveness or something like that for the process or the project, something like that. And then the last one is about having diverse team and putting in place ways to collaborate. So this is more like company culture, but it's also very important, like building an environment where you encourage question, honest communication between the people. Otherwise, it's very, very hard. And then like, yeah, collaboration, building places where if there's a risk, so this is more like, again, for stakeholders, things like that. If there's a risk, people feel comfortable voicing the risk. Like my project at the moment, we have a high risk where we have a lot of users who are really not happy about what we're building for very specific reasons. Like basically they bought a package and we are trying to fit squares into triangles, and users are very not happy about that. And I feel comfortable enough in the environment to go to my stakeholder to say, look, this is a risk that might happen, so we need to do something about that. I know we're not going to change the framework, but we might need to have change management here. We need to put emphasis on different things. We also need to communicate advantages for the users for this system to kind of counterbalance. And so if you don't build like environments where people can be trusted to voice these kind of risks, it might be a little bit tricky. And yeah, the list is non-exhaustive. It's just to give you a couple of ideas. So what you are going to do is you can go back to your boards. You can either copy paste them all. I forgot this here. Or you can copy paste the green stuff here, up to you. And then for the ones that you present in or the ones that you are most interested about, try to find some mitigation. So it can be my little cards, but of course, if you have other ideas of how we could either avoid that, or if it happens, kind of try to protect from the bad thing that might happen in the future because of that. That's also kind of mitigation, is about shielding, or if there's damage, how can we at least repair the damage, something like that. So is this clear? So it should look something like that, where you have your bias, you have your example, you have the little mitigation card, and then you can put a sticky note to explain, okay, this is how we would apply this to mitigate it. What time is it? 36. Let's give you 15 minutes for that. And I need to reopen the breakout rooms, which is I need to find the breakout button. So let's share this one. And this time, as promised, we will start with the group 4. So what's your favorite examples? 2 examples or 1, if you don't want to say 2, of mitigation strategies regarding the biases you identified in the previous exercise?
I think that bandwagon effect was the most interesting one for us. We put a lot of strategies to fight with this bias. And it's simple to a tendency to say or do what other people say or do. And we decided that it's really important to collect an individual feedback. That was also this one part when you joined our group. It's also important to bring user research data to opinion fights. And even if you're a standalone researcher, you can ask for some feedback, and you can consult something with another person from your company or whatever, or with a friend. Even I see one friend at this workshop that I consulted some parts of research. So, yeah. And we can also encourage questions and honest communication. It's not so easy, but sometimes we can ask additional questions or ask people who don't say too much in a group. Hey, and what do you think? What's your opinion? Why? We were also talking about 5 whys that we can put this strategy during our research. And of course, anonymize research effect. When you take a survey or do anything, people are more honest when they know that their managers won't recognize them and so on. And yeah, it helps.
Okay, thank you. Group 3, which one or what do you want to present?
I can go. So we talked about the Hawthorne effect and sunk cost fallacy. So the stuff that we grabbed on the Hawthorne effect, a lot of it I think has to do with like the mitigation is the presenting the pretest protocol and talking about the recording, talk about who's observing, talk about like where the recording is going to go, you know, ensuring them that they're going to be anonymous in the data and that, you know, just it's going to be the video and stuff is going to be locked down. So if you can, this is team diversity and collaboration, but like, you know,
yeah,
encourage them to voice open and honest opinions. This is not a test of you. I did not design this, so I'm not going to be offended. So, you know, tell them, encourage them to be open and honest in the feedback. Tell them about what you're going to do with the recording, who's observing and why, and anonymize it.
Yeah, and then
yes.
for the sunk cost, again, we're taking the examples that we talked about, developers and product teams potentially not wanting to let go of their precious roadmaps and features. A lot of the mitigation we focused on was about being transparent with why the change of direction is necessary to try and make the syncing and the cost feel less sinky and costly, I suppose. And the best way to do that is to be really open with the communication with the teams and say, look, we know you invested a lot of time into these features, but here's some data, here's the diversity of ideas. We're evaluating what you've done against what we identify as the priorities from the data. And therefore, we're not just doing it because we don't like you or your feature. We're doing it because it'll benefit the users in the long run. So I think, again, it comes down to communication and transparency about why you're making certain decisions, how you can mitigate that feeling of a sunk cost. And yeah, it all comes down to the research data, right? The point there about bringing data to opinion fights, I think sunk cost comes from an opinion fight a lot of the time, because what I think is a sunk cost, you might not think is a sunk cost. So we bring data to those opinions and make it feel less painful.
Yeah, that's kind of the way. Thank you. Group 2.
I am happy to share for us, and I'll share one example, and then if anyone else from our team wants to share another, I'll share about blind spot bias. So, you know, we all have blind spots, and similar to, you know, the idea of designers not testing their own designs, like if and where possible, like researchers may be distancing themselves a little bit from some of their research plans, whether that's, you know, if you have someone else, a researcher who's a teammate, delivering each other, you know, like facilitating each other's interviews, also acknowledging that that's not always possible, but like, you know, utilizing PMs where possible of, you know, hey, can you review this for bias? Can you actually run this research session here? Someone who you've normed with, who you feel comfortable doing that. Also looking at things like actually having a diverse team to represent a more diverse set of ideas and how you're actually creating your surveys and mitigating that bias through having a diverse team, as well as, you know, just like continuing to be trained, like this act right here of choosing to be together in this environment is mitigation. And so kind of committing to ongoing education, because things are always changing and there's always new ways in which we can be informed.
Yeah, like bias training is basically what you're doing today.
Yeah, totally.
That's the goal. Okay, good. Does anyone else want to share, or I go to group one? Okay, let's do group one. Group one, which one do you want to present?
We will present the confirmation bias and the ideas that we have brainstormed, basically. So apart of what was there already on the board, we have thought about debriefing collaboratively about the session. I think it's a nice way to to basically compare what we have learned and how we understand the learning. So I think that this is a nice moment to exchange basically, this is what we have learned, this is how we understand it. And then when sharing the insights, evidence-based insights, this is also, I think, one of the way we can mitigate confirmation bias. And we have also discussed one of the ideas that was there on the board, Stéphanie, avoid testing your own designs. And we've been sharing how challenging it is when research is democratized. So we have decided to add one more ideas, not only bias training, but training for people who do the research on good research practices. So basically taking it to one more higher level. So yes, this element of training. So it's basically collaboratively debrief after the sessions, deliver evidence-based insights, conduct research in pairs, so switch the roles when conducting the research. These were some of the ideas that we have discussed and brainstormed.
Yeah, so it boils down often to kind of the same things around, like a lot of the biases have kind of a same mitigation strategy. So that's the cool thing, is you can mitigate a lot at the same time. Okay, so for the rest of the board, I just have some resources. If you want to dig a little bit further, normally the links are clickable. Let me show you the stuff. So this is just a small part of a deck of 60 more cards. And as I said, there's kind of more categories, which is also used basically as a bias training, but also on how to use or not use biases when you're building interfaces. So that's the goal. And if you want to get today's cards, I've put them as a private link, so it's not in public. But since you participated to the workshop, the idea is you can download here, so you'll have like basically all of the little green cards, plus all the big cards that we use today. If you want to do this kind of exercise with colleagues to kind of help raise an awareness. And yeah, no, it's like feedback session and Q&A. So did you learn something today? Did you kind of discover new biases? How did the exercise feel for you? So that's the first one. And then, yeah, if you have questions about what we did today, biases, things like that. Or if you need to go, it's perfectly fine too. Don't worry. This is why I put the Q&A at the end. It's like, if you have time, then we can discuss, have an open discussion about all of that.
I definitely learned, and I appreciated, honestly, just getting to be with other enterprise researchers and other people who are around the globe. And I put like, that's my favorite thing about these workshops, is that it is a global audience, and just getting to hear about what the Flemish government is doing is really inspiring, and made me feel really curious about this practice. And so it just kind of re-energized me. So thank you.
Nice.
Yeah,
I was joking. Yeah, sorry. I was joking about I need to make a enterprise UX therapy session group at some point where we meet every month and just talk about enterprise on Zoom or something.
Yeah, that helps.
Fun.
It's so it's a lonely occupation sometimes, right? You're against a whole
Yeah.
room of people really convinced of their own bias, and you're just fighting that battle. So it's really nice to be in a group of people actually looking for those biases and confirming that they exist and acknowledging that they are a big deal. So yeah, energizing session.
I don't know who I interrupted. I'm super sorry.
It was me. I just like
Please
to mention that thank you so much for such workshop, and as mentioned to be the same minded people and the special enterprise, and we have our like habit with our UX researchers to synchronize once a week, and every time we're thinking about topics what we can share, and now I know what I can share to tell about you, Stephanie, your templates and what bias are existing based on that workshop. So thank you so much. It's a great job.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for all your feedback. This is actually super valuable. In case you still have some questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you're a bit tight on time, then we can always respond later and come back to you individually. Just a short reminder, everybody who participated today will also get an official certificate from us. You will get it shortly with a separate email so that you can acknowledge your learnings and maybe share it on LinkedIn if you want, or just have it as a badge. And yeah, if we don't have any other questions, because it seems like it, there is nothing in the chat, then only a cat, which is super cute, then I would say it's a wrap. And I'm just sharing a couple of links for you to know where to go if you'd like to stay updated with regards to the upcoming events, free workshops, seminars, and courses which we provide. Yeah, again, if you are interested in a free trial of Condens, there is also a link. And if you'd like to learn more about the tool, also share the link to the demo. I'm sorry, Elizabeth shared one quick question, so let's get back to the question, and then we will say it's a wrap officially. Yeah, Elizabeth, I think you can go.
Exactly. I think so
yeah,
I think
it's a mirror board file. So what you need to do is no, you need to go into Miro. You're gonna see the mess. Oh crap, not this mess. Here they change it every week. Import boards, and then you put upload, and RBT file is basically Miro file.
Okay.
So you need to import it in your Miro board. It's a backup of the board.
Okay. Okay. I will figure that out, and I will reach out if I get stuck.
Yeah, worst case, send me a DM or something. You need a paid Miro account. So maybe this is, if you don't see the import one, this is why they kind of blocked the feature for non-paid account.
Okay, I will figure it out, and yeah, it's not a problem. I was just like, oh, I can't download it. Just making sure. Awesome, thank you so much.
It's very weird format. I agree. So you need to import it.
Elizabeth, thank you for asking, because I'm sure not only you have the questions, so it's nice. But if you still face some troubles, make sure to text us or Stephanie, and we'll figure it out. Again, thank you everybody for participating. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. I think it was a great contribution you made to the user research community in general. So
yeah, I was happy.
Connected, yeah. And you'll hear back from me soon with the certificate and the recording of this meeting. Don't worry, no one apart from you will get it. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.